in this lesson, we're going to be looking at maybe creating some sort of power up that we can collect, and it will destroy the enemies automatically for us. So even the ones that tracks you down and try to blow up, and the ones that shoot at you as well. All right, so let's get started on how we would create this trigger event. Okay, so the trigger event would be something like you'd put in front of a doorway, so when your player enters it, maybe the light turns on or something like that. But it's really kind of handy for a lot of things. And to create one, all you need is a game object, maybe something like this cube that I'm making. Right, and right now, if I would play the game, you would see that I cannot go through this cube because it has a box collider on it. So I'm stuck. Even my bullets will hit it too. But the box collider also comes with a little checkbox here that you can say is trigger. And what that does, it makes it so that it's a trigger more than it is a collider. So now I can pass right through it. And while I'm going through it, I'll have my script trigger something. When you go through it, you're activating that trigger and it will trigger something. So what people normally do is they will turn off like the mesh renderer, and then you can create yourself like a little trigger zone, kind of like this, right? And you can say, well, this might be like a checkpoint or something like that, so when someone touches it, boom, you know, something happens, right? But we're gonna do this with an asset that's in here. I believe there's like a coin in here somewhere. I thought the coin would be a great, hey, here's a coin. Put the coin out there. It has a mesh renderer on it. You cannot do the trigger with the mesh renderer, so I'm going to remove the mesh renderer. And I'm going to apply a boss collider. And then I'm going to say, see, right where it is? I'm going to say is trigger. So now with the is trigger, the way it works is pretty cool. It's similar to the on collision, except it would be on trigger. So first thing I'm going to do next is create a script to handle that like trigger. So I'm going to say, I'm going to call it coin trigger. And where's the coin in the scene? What is it called? Pick up, okay. So I'll take my coin trigger and just place it on my coin, and then let's hop into the script and see what we can do here. So it starts off with, you know, Unity creates the two functions for us to start the update by default. One other thing to note here as you look around my scene is my enemies. I'm gonna tag them all as enemy and just apply that to all the other prefabs, and then the red ones I'm gonna do the same, apply it to all of the other prefabs. So all of my greens and all of my reds are enemies, because I'm going to use my tags to destroy all of them across the board, right? So the way the trigger works is really simple. Because the coin has the checkbox that is trigger, I can now pass through it, and when I pass through it, the on trigger event is called. So if you go to your script, there's an on trigger enter event, and then other. Now this means anything that goes through it right now will trigger that trigger, right? Anything. If I shoot at it, boom, it goes through it. If the enemies, the same thing. So what I'll use is other represents, in this case, it's colliding. Whatever is colliding with it currently to trigger the event is represented by other. So every time something goes through it, right? Every time something goes through it, this event is called. And I'm being thorough with explaining this because I want to make sure everyone really gets it. Every time something goes through it, this event is called and send us back what is going through it. What is the other other object that's going through it. So not itself, but what is the other thing that's colliding with it and going through it and triggering it right now. That's represented by this, and it's a trigger. So you would say if other, you can see the other is that collider object. It's not the game object yet, but it's the collider of that game object. So you say if that other collider dot game object dot tag equal like player or something. So I'm just making sure it's the player that's touching it, and my player does have the tag player with a capital P, so make sure it's spelled the same. So now if it's my player that is the one that just touched it, I can do something here, and I want to destroy all the enemies. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly create a game object array. So boom boom. And I'll just call this enemies, right? Just like that. All the game objects. An array of game object. Now just call it enemies. And I'm gonna populate this enemies array with all of the enemies with a simple line of code here. Just say enemies equal, and now let's find the game object dot find with tag. You see find objects with an S with tag, which gives us back, returns an empty, it returns an array of objects, right? See right there? So boom, what is the tag that all the enemies are gonna have? I believe it's enemy, and boom. So now I've stored all the enemies in the scene in here, but that's boom when the game starts immediately. So what I would actually want to do is not put this in the start. I wouldn't even want the start, to be honest with you. I'll put this here so that later on when I'm spawning in enemies, which is actually going to be in the next lesson. So when I'm spawning in enemies randomly and I touch the coin, it will destroy currently what is on the field when I touch the coin. And then if I had another coin and I touch it, it will destroy it. So now that I have that, I've stored all the enemies in enemies, and I'm checking for when the player touches the coin here. I'll simply write, I can use a for each, or I can use a for loop, because you cannot say destroy enemies. You cannot do that because it's an array. So if I say I want to destroy the first element of enemies, yeah, that works. If I want to destroy the second element, that works. So what I need to do is actually loop through this array and destroy them all. And a good loop actually, we don't need the for loop. The for each actually works really well right here. So you can say for each, and X will represent all the game objects. So see, I'm creating a variable here, game object X, okay? So X is going to be represent all the game objects. So for each element in our enemies, X will represent all of those elements in the game. So I just say destroy X, and we are done, right? So we just loop through all the enemies. This way we don't have to put like array.len to get the full length. Like this already does all of that, right? And with that said, and with this done, we have successfully created a trigger here, and I'm gonna go ahead and test it out. So back to Unity, it's compiling. Look at my camera here. I'm thinking I want some more view of the field, so I'm just gonna pull this up a little bit like that, right? Might be a little too tiny, but yeah, we'll mess around with it. So that's what I have so far. Everything still works. They attack me and everything, and then I'll go and touch the coin. Boom, they're all gone. Right? Every single one of them blasted to the oblivion. So, another thing we can do is, if you noticed, if that's what that's what you were looking for in this tutorial, then you got it, and you can stop. But another thing we can do is, if you notice when I shoot them, there is this explosion that happens. Um, Technically, they should be destroyed afterwards, but I haven't coded that in yet. But there is at least that explosion that's happening, right? Send them flying sometimes. Boom. And that's kind of cool. So I wouldn't destroy them immediately. I would send them flying and then I'll destroy them. If I shoot this, you know, it doesn't trigger it because it's not the player. I'll get you closer to it. You went flying really high. Here he comes. Where? There. Boom. You see the explosion, and when I touch the coin, they just poof disappeared. No explosion. So what we could do is also create something like that as well. So, same deal, right? Like I do for the enemies, I have an explosion prefab that I'm using, and when I hit them, when they hit me, they spawn in the explosion, yada yada yada. I'll do the same thing as what they did there. So I'll even copy and paste. I'll grab this variable here for the explosion, and I'm gonna do this on the coin. Completely different. So on the coin, I'm gonna create a variable here from the explosion prefab, and then what I'm gonna say here is, let me grab this. And we'll go down here. So here we're destroying the game object. So what we're gonna do is this, copy this and paste it there. And what this is gonna say now, let me just make this bigger so we can all see it. I'm creating a game object, and I'm calling it _explode, so that when we spawn in the clone here, when we spawn in the explosion, we have a reference to the explosion, so we can destroy the explosion 2 seconds later. So we spawn the explosion not at the coin's position, but at x.transform.position. Okay, x.transform. So we spawn this in. Every time this loop goes around, it finds the other enemy, spawns it, boom, boom, boom. It all happens. It's gonna be glorious. All right, so spawn in the game object, the explosion game object, at the X position. Set it to destroy that explosion after 2 seconds, and of course destroy the enemy himself immediately. So all you're gonna see is explosion, and then the explosion goes away. Because when I spawn in the explosion, it is a game object that spawns in and goes boom. So unless we clear it, we're gonna have too many of those just piling up in our hierarchy. All right. So with that done, hopefully that wasn't too fast for you guys. If I play now, oops, we shouldn't play yet. We shouldn't play it. We have to go back to, what is it, coin pickup, and you can see I have this slot here for the explosion. I do need to put it in there. I'll just search explosion. That's enemy. I think it was mobile something. I gotta go to all, not seen, all asset explosion, and I'm gonna use the mobile one. And there. All right. So now play, and you can see if I shoot this one here in a little explosion. Now if I touch the coin, boom. Ha, glorious. They all go boom. All right, let's see that one more time, because that was very pleasing. We try to get yeah, let's try to get this guy closer. Come on, follow me. Come on, follow me. Ooh, don't blow up. Don't follow me. Follow me. The other guy shot him. Come on, follow me. Follow me, and boom. Excellent. That was amazing. All right. So the next one, I'm gonna show you how to. What I'm pretty much gonna do is delete all these enemies from the scene and have them randomly spawn in to the scene, including the coin power up will also just randomly spawn that in every so often. And then we're ready for the battle royale. All right. So I'll catch you in the next one. It was my pleasure, and see you in the next one.